Imagine looking up at the sky and seeing not an airplane, but an entire city floating gracefully above the clouds, glowing with clean energy, humming with life, and powered by one of the most mysterious inventors of our time, Maxwell Chikumbutso. To understand this breathtaking achievement, we must return to the mind that made it possible. Maxwell Chikumbutso, the Zimbabwean engineer whose inventions have long defied conventional science. He once developed self-powered electric cars, wireless electricity systems, and even microgenerators capable of producing infinite clean energy. While many dismiss his ideas as impossible, Maxwell persisted quietly, refining technologies the world could barely comprehend. The Flying City's foundation rests on three of Maxwell's groundbreaking inventions: the greener power generator, a wireless system that generates electricity without fuel; the quantum resonance drive, a propulsion system using electromagnetic fields to achieve lift and thrust without combustion; the smart energy grid, a network that wirelessly distributes power across multiple platforms, enabling everything from lighting to flight stabilization. Together, these systems create a closed-loop ecosystem that recycles energy faster than it's consumed, effectively achieving a near-perpetual state of flight. As footage of the city's first public ascent spread online, global reactions were immediate. Major tech hubs from Silicon Valley to Shenzhen expressed astonishment. Some experts called it a hoax, until international observers confirmed the phenomenon with live radar and satellite imagery. While debates raged on about how it works, one truth became clear. Africa had officially entered the global stage of advanced innovation, and this time it wasn't following anyone's lead. Zion Aero City represents more than just a technological marvel. It's a declaration of independence from the old energy systems that have shaped global power for over a century. It's a message to the world. The future won't be owned by a single nation or corporation. It will rise from the collaboration of minds bold enough to dream beyond the limits of physics, politics, and doubt. And as this floating city glides silently above the horizon, one can't help but wonder, if Africa can make a city fly, what comes next? Perhaps the real miracle isn't just in the machines or the science, but in the courage of man who believed that Africa could lead the world into the sky. Maxwell Chikumbutso didn't just invent technology. He redefined possibility itself. And now, as the world watches this flying city drift across the clouds, one thing is undeniable. The future has taken off, and it began in Africa. As the floating city continued its journey across the African skies, people from towns and villages below gathered in awe. For many, it was their first glimpse of what they believed to be pure science fiction, a city suspended above the clouds, moving silently, with golden light rippling across its surface like a living organism. It was a vision that touched something deeper than curiosity. It stirred pride, hope, and a renewed sense of identity. Africa, the cradle of humanity, had now become the cradle of the world's most advanced technological leap. For centuries, it had been a land of untapped potential, often overlooked and underestimated. Yet here it was, proving that innovation is not bound by borders or wealth, but by imagination and courage. Inside Zion Aero City, life was unlike anywhere on Earth. There were no streets filled with cars, no roaring engines, and no pollution hanging in the air. Instead, residents moved effortlessly through magnetic pods, levitating capsules that glided along invisible tracks. The air was clean, purified by living biofilters embedded into the city's outer shell. Every building was an intelligent structure, self-adjusting to sunlight, temperature, and pressure. Schools operated with AI mentors guiding children through immersive learning environments, teaching them not just about science and history, but about empathy, creativity, and balance with nature. Gardens floated between platforms, nourished by moisture harvested from the atmosphere. It was a vision of human civilization harmonizing with technology rather than fighting against it. Maxwell Chikumbutso often walked among the engineers and scientists who maintained the city's core systems. He wasn't dressed in the grandeur one might expect from a visionary of his scale. He moved quietly, with the humility of someone who had seen both rejection and revelation. Those who work alongside him describe him not as a man obsessed with machines, but as someone inspired by nature's hidden laws. He often said that energy was never truly created, only translated. His goal was to decode the language of the universe and use it to elevate humanity. Zion Aero City was not built to impress. It was built to awaken. As weeks passed, global interest turned into collaboration. Nations that once doubted Africa's technological capacity now sought partnerships to study and learn from the systems powering the city. Environmental organizations hailed it as a first real step toward eliminating global pollution. Scientists began to speculate whether Maxwell's energy systems could one day be used to power entire continents without a single drop of fuel. The idea of limitless, renewable power, once dismissed as fantasy, was now hovering above the Earth in radiant proof. But even as praise grew, Maxwell remained grounded. When asked in an interview what Zion Aero City meant to him, he smiled and said softly, "It's not about flying cities. It's about elevating minds." His words echoed through universities and research centers across the continent, inspiring a new generation of African inventors. Young minds who once dreamed of leaving their homelands to find opportunity abroad began to realize that the future could be built right where they stood. Innovation had finally found a home, not in skyscrapers of glass, but in the hearts of those who believed. In time, Zion Aero City became more than just a technological marvel. It became a living symbol of unity. Scientists from Kenya worked with architects from Ghana. Coders from Nigeria collaborated with material engineers from Ethiopia. And together they wove the threads of a new identity for the continent, one defined not by scarcity, but by shared brilliance. The flying city began to host summits, research labs, and peace forums. Leaders from around the world were invited to experience firsthand what Africa had created, and many left transformed by what they saw, a society that had chosen innovation without exploitation, advancement without arrogance, and progress without pollution. As the sun set behind the clouds, casting long golden rays across the floating horizon, the city's reflection shimmered like a second dawn. It was a reminder that the future is not something that happens. It's something humanity chooses to build. And somewhere high above the earth, amid the hum of electromagnetic resonance, Africa's choice was clear. It had chosen to rise. Maxwell himself often preferred solitude, though his name had become legendary. He continued to spend hours in quiet workshops beneath the city's core, surrounded by coils, plasma emitters, and crystal circuits that glowed with soft blue light. He believed that the secret to endless energy was not found in complexity, but in simplicity, in learning from how the universe sustains itself. "Everything we need," he once said to his team, "is already around us. We just have to listen." Those words became etched into the city's philosophy. Every system, every innovation, was designed not to dominate nature, but to coexist with it. The more the city evolved, the more it became an emblem of peace. Nations that once struggled with resource shortages began to adopt scaled-down versions of Maxwell's generators. Rural villages in distant regions received wireless power for the first time. Entire communities that once lived in darkness were suddenly illuminated, their nights transformed by the same energy that kept Zion Aero City aloft. The ripple effect was enormous. Economies began to stabilize, schools flourished, and the brain drain that had long plagued Africa started to reverse. Talented engineers and thinkers returned home, drawn by the promise of a continent now seen as the birthplace of the future. From orbit, satellites captured breathtaking images of the city gliding through the atmosphere like a celestial ship. Its golden rings pulsed softly, stabilizing its flight through electromagnetic harmonics. Scientists from around the world marveled at how it sustained perfect balance without combustion or fuel. For them, the city defied everything they thought they knew about gravity and energy. But to Maxwell, it wasn't defiance. It was understanding. He believed that when humanity stopped seeing science as a battle against nature and began seeing it as a partnership, the impossible would become natural. Zion Aero City was living proof of that philosophy. Beyond the city, Maxwell's work began to inspire a movement of sky communities, smaller, autonomous habitats designed for different regions. Some were research platforms studying weather and atmospheric life, while others focused on growing clean food above polluted lands. The dream of a network of floating cities no longer felt like fantasy. It was slowly unfolding into a new chapter of human civilization, one where the sky was no longer a limit, but home. And so, while the rest of the world still debated theories, regulations, and ownership of this new technology, Maxwell and his team continued their quiet work, guided by a purpose larger than recognition. They were not just building machines. They were nurturing a new consciousness, one that saw the Earth not as a resource to be consumed, but as a living companion to be protected and cherished. As years passed, Zion Aero City became more than a marvel, it became a legacy. The skies over Africa were no longer silent. They shimmered with a faint glow of new floating platforms, each carrying schools, research stations, and communities devoted to learning and creation. Below, cities grew greener and cleaner, drawing energy from Maxwell's self-sustaining systems. The harmony between earth and sky deepened, and for the first time in generations, humanity began to understand balance, not as a concept, but as a way of living. The once skeptical nations of the world now collaborated freely, sharing resources and knowledge as the barriers of geography and ideology slowly dissolved. The age of competition gave way to an era of cooperation, and it all began with one dream that took flight above the African plains. Maxwell Chikumbutso, older now and quieter than before, spent most of his days watching the horizon from the observatory deck of Zion Aero City. Below him, the continent that had raised him now stood as a symbol of hope for all humanity. From this great height, he often reflected on the years of doubt, the long nights of experimentation, and the quiet moments of faith that had carried him through. When he looked at the city floating gently across the clouds, he saw not a monument to his genius, but a reflection of what could happen when people believed in the impossible and worked together without fear. To him, Zion Aero City was not just a city. It was a prayer answered through perseverance and vision. One evening, as the sun melted into a sea of amber light, a gathering took place in the city's central plaza. People from every corner of the continent stood together beneath the open dome, their faces illuminated by soft, golden radiance. Maxwell was invited to speak, though he hesitated at first. When he finally stepped forward, his words were few but profound. He said, "This city does not belong to me. It belongs to everyone who dares to dream. It is proof that creation is not a privilege. It is our nature. When we choose unity over fear and curiosity over doubt, the sky itself becomes our home." His voice was gentle, but it carried through the still air like a melody, settling in the hearts of those who listened. As the applause faded, a hush fell over the city. For a moment, it felt as if the entire world paused to breathe with Zion Aero City. The stars appeared one by one, shimmering above the floating metropolis like ancient witnesses to a new dawn. From space, Earth now looked different, not just because of the lights that drifted gently in the upper atmosphere, but because of the peace that had begun to take root across its surface. The era of struggle and separation had not vanished, but it found its balance within a greater story, one of unity, creativity, and faith in human potential. Years later, after Maxwell's passing, his name became a symbol of what it meant to believe in something larger than oneself. His teachings continued through schools and centers dedicated to his work, where young minds learned not only about science, but about purpose. Zion Aero City remained in flight, maintained by generations who had inherited not just technology, but wisdom. It became a place of pilgrimage, a sanctuary for thinkers, dreamers, and innovators from every nation. And though time moved forward, the city never lost its quiet grace. It drifted above the earth like a living reminder that humanity's greatest power lies not in its inventions, but in its imagination. In the end, the story of Zion Aero City was not about machines or energy or even flight. It was about faith, faith in progress, faith in collaboration, and faith in the unseen forces that guide creation. The city continued its journey across the skies, shining softly through mist and moonlight, whispering to the world below that the future is not something we wait for. It is something we build together, one dream at a time. And so, Africa's flying city became eternal, a luminous chapter in the story of humanity's awakening. Above the clouds, it soared quietly into the horizon, carrying with it the spirit of man who dared to turn the impossible into light and the promise of a world that finally learned how to rise.